We'll go the same way. First, we'll see the location of the descending tract on the spinal cord, and then we're going to discuss where those tracts are located, what their function is. Then we'll trace the descending tract one by one in detail. In fact, we'll only talk about the pyramidal tract in detail. So here we go. This is the spinal cord once again, and so this, when you talk about descending tract, the main tract which comes to everyone's mind is the pyramidal tract, or the corticospinal tract. That's a major descending tract we get. So we have a tract called as the pyramidal. The reason we call it pyramidal tract, the name given to pyramidal tract, is because of the pyramids they are forming in the medulla oblongata. We'll see that in the brainstem. So we have elevation in the midline of the medulla on the ventral aspect. We call them pyramids. So the name given to them is pyramidal tract. But by the time pyramidal tract reaches the spinal cord, it is decussated and everything is done. By the time it reaches the spinal cord, we have two parts of pyramidal tract to be seen here. One which is present in the lateral side of the spinal cord, and other part is seen in the anterior part of the spinal cord. And that's how they're named also. Let me try to label them together, this one and this one. This and this one. So that is placed anteriorly, so I name it as anterior. And this is placed laterally, so let's call it lateral. Anterior and lateral corticospinal tract. Anterior and lateral corticospinal tract. So these are the two components of the pyramidal tract. One is anterior corticospinal and one is lateral corticospinal. And as you can see, the nomenclature here is based on that where they are present in the spinal cord. Now, wherever they are coming from, wherever they are in the brainstem, or wherever they are in the higher in the brainstem, in the internal capsule, that is not the point. The point is location of these tracts in the spinal cord. One is anteriorly placed, so we anterior. One is laterally placed, so word lateral. Corticospinal tract, from the cortex to the spinal cord, corticospinal. Another difference in the lateral and anterior corticospinal tract is that, guys, anterior corticospinal tract are those fibers which are uncrossed, and lateral corticospinal fibers are the one which are decussated or the crossed fiber. So this pyramidal tract will come to certain level, and then some fiber will cross and some fiber will not cross. The one fiber which are not crossing and running on the same side of the spinal cord, then that tract is what anterior. But the one which decussate to the other side and then comes down into the spinal cord, those fibers are the lateral corticospinal tract. We will discuss that exactly how decussation takes place. Now, whether it is crossed or uncrossed, we are talking about the pyramidal tract, and the function of pyramidal tract is obviously the skilled voluntary movements. Skilled voluntary movements, or simply you can say voluntary movement, that is to be done by the corticospinal tract, both anterior and lateral. What one difference is crossed and uncrossed, then there is another difference which we will discuss while talking about the tract. Then we have a tract which is present very close to the lateral corticospinal tract. Now, guys, this tract is very well developed in the lower animals. In human, they usually say this tract is basically this is a part assisting the corticospinal tract, coming from the red nucleus. Now, we do have red nucleus and we have a higher center also. In certain lower animals, this tract in us, which is coming from red nucleus, is the highest type of motor neuron system for them. So in us, it is coming from the red nucleus, and the name given to this obviously is rubrospinal. In rubrospinal tract. Now, if I tell you about the function of rubrospinal tract, it will be interesting if we'll discuss the rubrospinal tract along with another tract which is present very much in the anterior side here. The anterior side. And guys, this tract is coming from the vestibular nuclei. So obviously the name will be what? Vestibulospinal tract. So there is an interesting discussion. Vestibulospinal tract. We got a rubrospinal tract and we have a vestibulospinal tract. Now the reason I'm talking about them together because their function is very contrasting. Rubrospinal tract function is to facilitate the flexors, like all the flexors. If I have to bend forward, I'm facilitating all my flexors. But it inhibits the extensors. So like the extensors are inhibited when the rubrospinal tract is working. It is facilitating these flexors and inhibiting the extensors. Whereas vestibulospinal tract is exactly opposite. It facilitates extensors and inhibit flexors. And when you facilitate your extensor, you need to facilitate your extensors because you need to maintain a certain posture. Now, imagine if you're simply standing. If you're standing, guys, your posture, you maintaining that posture is not merely because your legs are extended or your hip is extended, is also because of your back muscles are having some sort of extensor tone. Imagine if there is no extensor tone in your back muscle, or if there is a vestibulospinal tract injury, then you will not be able to contract these or involuntarily. I mean, these are the voluntary muscles, but without your any conscious effort, you're not able to control these muscles or maintain the tone of these muscles and cannot maintain the posture. Like, give me an example. Vestibulospinal tract coming from vestibular nuclei. And we all know that vestibular nuclei is for balancing. So this tract coming from the brainstem all the way to the spinal cord is supplying the extensor muscle mainly, and it keep on facilitating those extensors so that you can maintain a posture, whether it is standing, sitting, or whatever it is. So that particular posture is maintained with respect to the environment. And thankfully that is because of vestibulospinal tract. Comparison when we do. So we said rubrospinal tract, you remember it like this. Rubrospinal tract, it facilitate what? It facilitate flexors and inhibit extensors. You can write the full thing. It facilitate flexors and inhibit extensors. Facilitate flexors and inhibit extensors. Whereas vestibulospinal tract, on the other hand, it facilitate extensors and inhibit flexors. Facilitate extensors and inhibit flexors. That's why this vestibulospinal tract is a postural tract. It helps to maintain the posture. It's a postural tract. Rubrospinal tract facilitate flexors, inhibit extensor, and vestibulospinal tract is exactly opposite, ulta. It's facilitate extensor and inhibit flexor. Apart from that, another important tract that you should know, which is present in between the anterior corticospinal and vestibulospinal tract, guys, here somewhere in the anterior funiculus only. This tract is called as the tectospinal tract. I'll tell you more about this. It's called as a tectospinal tract. So when you say the word tectospinal, look at the word tecto. Tecto word came from tectum, and tectum is a part of midbrain. Tectum is a part of midbrain. Now let me write the function first before we go any further. Tectospinal tract function is it basically coordinates the head and head and neck and eyeball movement based on any visual stimulus. Let me take an example. Your head and neck movement and your ocular movement are generally they're done together, and this is something we usually don't pay attention to. I mean, if I'm turning my head to this side, my eyeball axis has also turned along with the head. Although if I wanted, I may not want to move my axis of eye, so I may want to fix it somewhere and I want to move my head. Let's say if I'm watching a match and somebody calls my name from this side, or if I have to look at that side, something happened on that side and I suddenly have to turn there. So I can turn my head to that side, but my eyeball can be fixed in front, or vice versa. I still keep on looking forward or keeping my face forward, but I can just turn my eye and can look on the other side. So that's a coordination between the head and neck and the ocular movement. Not necessarily every time you move your head, you have to move your eyeball also. That is actually up to you. Generally, unconsciously what happens is, if I have to turn my head, so I will turn my head, my eyeball is also start looking at that side. And if I turn my head to this side, my eyeball will turn to that side here. Now it doesn't happen like if you turn your head to one side, the eyeball will follow. So first your head will go and then slowly the eyeball will come. That doesn't happen, thankfully, because of this tract. The tectospinal tract, it coordinates the movement of head and neck and eyeball. Based on the visual stimulus. I got a visual stimulus. If I got a visual stimulus, let's take another example. If I'm standing in my balcony and I'm watching a road and I can see there are some like some vehicles are passing by. So I'm looking at some car is going there from, let's say, some Lamborghini or some nice car is going from there, and I started looking at it. Now I looked at that car and I fixed my eyeball to that car. I got a visual stimulus. I fixed my eyeball to that car because I want to look at it. And now where the car is going, my head is moving along with it, and along my eyeball are also moving along with. I'll keep on tracing that car till it is completely gone. So what happened here is, what is to be noticed here, my eyeball moved and my head and neck also moved together. It's not that I'm first waiting for the car to go till here and my eyeball will follow it, and then if my eyeball cannot work any further, then I started moving my head and neck. Then car will go further again, then again I move my eyeball, and then I move my head. That doesn't happen. And that is because of, we have this tract, thankfully, that is tectospinal tract, which is for the coordinated movement of head, neck and eyeball, head, neck and eyeball, based on, now that's important, based on what stimulus? Based on the visual stimulus. Based on the visual stimulus, because we will be discussing a tract which will be having a similar sort of function, but based on the auditory stimulus, that is like MLF, medial longitudinal fasciculus. So that medial longitudinal fasciculus that we have in the brainstem, that will work in a different way. That will work based on the auditory stimulus, that you get an auditory stimulus from one side and then you turn your head and neck and eyeball to that side. So that is an auditory stimulus. This is about the visual stimulus. Now there are other tracts also which are present at the cross section level of the spinal cord, but we don't have to look into them, like vestibulospinal. We have a reticulospinal, medial, lateral reticulospinal tracts are also there. So that we're just looking at the important one. Location of the tract is, guys, very important. I told you the location. If you know the location, then you can actually deal with the image based questions, because if you know the tract is present on the anterior side, so the question might be, if there is an injury to the anterior most part of the spinal cord, then which tract will be gone? Like if there is a question says syndrome called as Brown-Sequard syndrome, so all the tract of one side is gone. There is a central canal syndrome, so the tracts which are close to the center, the tracts which are close to the centers will be gone, and the dorsal column tract will be spared. So the location is also very important. Just knowing the name and the function is not enough. You have to know their location also in this schematic diagram. Now there is some comparison that I want to do before we go to the pyramidal tract, and that comparison goes between the rubrospinal and tectospinal. Now you will say, what comparison is that? That is coming from red nucleus. It is coming from the midbrain. So how can we compare them? Their function are also not comparable. No, it's not about the function. It's about their morphology. It is about their topography, where they are present. Rubrospinal tract starts from the red nucleus, which is in the midbrain. Tectospinal tract is starting from the tectum, which is again a part of midbrain. So both these tracts, they start exactly from the same level of the midbrain. Both these tracts, they both decussate at the same level of the midbrain, and then they descend downward and reach the spinal cord. So that means if I get a transverse section of the midbrain, I will be looking at two decussation over there. So I should be able to identify that which one is for rubrospinal and which one is for tectospinal tract, because you may not see the fibers directly coming out of the red nucleus and decussating. So to understand this comparison, let me ask you to roughly draw this transverse section of the midbrain, guys. That's how it goes. This is the transverse section of the midbrain. And let us say that section is taken at the level of the superior colliculus. That's important for us. This section is taken at the level of superior colliculus. How do we divide midbrain? Well, midbrain can be divided in three parts. This dorsal part of the midbrain, guys, the one which I'm highlighting right now, where you can see colliculus, the superior colliculus, inferior colliculus, that dorsal aspect of the brainstem is called as the tectum. This portion of the midbrain is referred as the tectum. Then from the colliculus till the substantia nigra, this portion here, that part is called as the tegmentum. That is the tegmentum. And I don't have to tell you about this part. We already discussed that this is called as a cerebral peduncle. I'm just writing CP over there. That is cerebral. Cerebral, not cerebellar. Cerebral peduncle. And if you wonder why do we call it cerebral peduncle, it's a part of midbrain because the descending tracts from the cerebrum are present here only. Pyramidal tract or extrapyramidal tract, they are all located in this part here. So the name given to this is a cerebral peduncle, although it is a part of midbrain. Although it is a part of midbrain. We call it cerebral peduncle. So tectum, tegmentum and cerebral peduncle. The dorsal part is tectum, middle part is tegmentum and the ventral most part here is a cerebral peduncle. And as we said, the section is taken from where? From the superior colliculus of the midbrain. Red nucleus is located in the tegmentum part, guys. You have this huge red nucleus present in the tegmentum part. Now please notice that the fiber which are starting from superior colliculus, those fiber which will start from superior colliculus will come forward in the tegmentum and cross here. In the tegmentum, make sure the decussation is taking place in the tegmentum. And same thing here, the fibers which are coming from the red nucleus, they will also come in the tegmentum only. Anyways, it is in the tegmentum and also decussates. Because fibers coming from superior colliculus are coming from which part of the midbrain? Tectum. So this is the tract called as a tectospinal tract. You know, the tectospinal tract, this is the one. And this coming from red nucleus, that is a rubrospinal tract. So in the midbrain, if you see a decussation more toward the posterior side of tegmentum, that is for the tectospinal tract, more toward the anterior side in the tegmentum, that is a rubrospinal tract. And that's why these decussations are also given name. This decussation here is called as a dorsal tegmental decussation because it takes place in the tegmentum, and this is ventral tegmental decussation. Please don't confuse, guys. Dorsal tegmental decussation. The tract is tectospinal tract because it starts from the tectum, but decussation is in the tegmentum. So if I give it number 1 here, this one, and let me give it number 2. So 1 is the dorsal tegmental decussation. Dorsal tegmental decussation. And number 2 is ventral. It is present more anteriorly, so that's a ventral tegmental decussation. Dorsal tegmental decussation, as we said, it is for the tectospinal tract. It's a straight question. Tectospinal tract. And ventral tegmental decussation belongs to rubrospinal tract. They do ask a straight question on this, that which tract is for what. Which decussation belongs to what tract here. Dorsal for the tectospinal and ventral tegmental decussation is for the rubrospinal tract. It could be an image-based question also. They can give you the section of the midbrain at the level of the superior colliculus, and they might show you the decussating fiber in the dorsal and the ventral part. You can understand that easily because we know the tegmentum is more posteriorly placed, so obviously the decussation is also posteriorly placed. Okay, so this is about the two tracts which are decussating here. Now coming to the last major tract here, the pyramidal tract, that how exactly it started, till what point it will go, and how it decussate to reach the spinal cord, to reach the effector muscles actually. So the final thing that we're discussing here is, guys, the pyramidal tract. Well, in case of pyramidal tract, this time we'll be looking at the motor cortex. Descending tract, obviously we'll start with the motor cortex. Motor cortex, guys, area number 4. 3, 1 and 2 was sensitive. This is motor cortex, that is area number 4. The tract from the motor cortex will descend downward, will become a part of internal capsule and corona radiata. We will discuss that in the later part in the cerebrum only. I want to take your attention directly to the brainstem. Once these fibers, they reach the brainstem, they're still on the same side. My right pyramidal tract starting from the right cerebral hemisphere, till the time it reaches the brainstem, it is still on the right side only. It is still on the right side. So guys, if let's say this here is the brainstem. So very schematically, guys, let's say if this box here represents the brainstem, and we got three part here: midbrain, pons, and medulla oblongata. If this here is midbrain, we got pons, and that is medulla oblongata. So I would again wanted to draw this midline passing through the brainstem and extend this downward all the way to the spinal cord. Okay, so that's the plot we'll be needing here. We got a motor cortex, we got three parts of the brainstem which are shown here, the midline, and that is the spinal cord. Obviously, we have some other details to be added in this, but our aim is to understand how the tract is reaching. We can always add those details later on. Now, the pyramidal tract starting from the motor cortex, guys, it will run on the same side, like it is running close to the midline, but on the same side. Whether it is midbrain, pons, and medulla oblongata, it is close to the midline only. And when these fiber reaches the medulla oblongata, the lower part of medulla oblongata, more precisely, so like these are 100% fiber here running on the same side. They're all total fibers are there. So till here, all 100% fiber are same side. But once they reach the lower part of medulla oblongata, out of which 85 to 90% of fibers they will decussate. A huge number will decussate. 85 to 90%, imagine. And once they decussate in the medulla oblongata, they again descend downward and reach the lateral part of the spinal cord. Look at this. Make sure you draw it on the lateral part of the spinal cord. And that's why this tract is called the lateral corticospinal tract, because ultimately it is coming to the lateral side of spinal cord. That is 85 to 90% fibers. But remaining 10 to 15% fiber will keep running on the same side. Look at this. They'll keep running on the same side. And that means anteriorly or close to the midline only. And thereby they reach the anterior part of the spinal cord. That's why we call them anterior corticospinal tract. First point to be noted here, where the decussation is taking place. Pyramidal decussation is taking place in the lower medulla oblongata. This is pyramidal decussation. There is a pyramidal decussation, and that is taking place where? In the lower medulla oblongata. That's one question. They've asked this question more than once. What is the level for pyramidal decussation? It's just saying medulla oblongata is not enough. It is a lower part of medulla oblongata. What is the result? The result of this decussation is that 85%, let me stick to one number, 85% fibers are decussating to the other side, and they're giving rise to the lateral corticospinal tract. They're coming from the cortex, going to the spinal cord. So obviously corticospinal, lateral corticospinal tract. And the remaining 10 to 15%, let's go with 15% fiber running on the same side, that is the anterior corticospinal tract. That is anterior corticospinal tract. 85, 15. Reach the white matter of the spinal cord. Still not out. We still have to supply the muscle outside. Now this is the interesting part, guys. 85 are decussating and 15 are not decussating. This thing is only true when we talk at the level of the brainstem. We say 85% fibers are decussating, 15 are not, because in actual, everything decussates. Even these 15% fiber, they will decussate, but the point is, they will decussate at the level of the spinal cord. See, you already know in the ventral horn, we have a lateral nuclei, let's say lateral nuclei, and we have a lower motor neuron coming out from here. And we have a medial nuclei from where again a lower motor neuron will come out. Just look at this, the way I'm trying to explain this thing. Lower motor neuron from the lateral nucleus of the ventral horn, lower motor neuron from the medial nucleus of ventral horn. And why I'm marking this? Because you know that lower motor neuron coming from the lateral nucleus is going to supply what muscle? Limb muscles. Whereas the one which will be coming from the medial nucleus will be supplying the midline muscle or axial muscle. Right? That was it. And this will make sense to you. Obviously, for this lateral corticospinal tract, it's easy to come into the spinal cord and relay onto these lower motor neuron which are toward the lateral side only. So these fibers will come in here and will relay at this point, and then obviously lower motor neuron will go out and supply limb muscle. Anterior corticospinal tract, what will it do? It will decussate at the level of spinal cord. Now, if it decussates at the level of spinal cord, obviously it is easy for them to reach where? The medial one. So they will decussate at this level here, and then they will relay to this medial group of nucleus, which is going to supply the midline or axial muscles. So this also tells me that lateral corticospinal tract and anterior corticospinal tract, the only difference is not the this is not the only difference they have. One is decussating and one is not decussating in medulla. The other difference is what muscle they are going to supply. So you can also note that the lateral corticospinal tract is going to supply the limb muscles, which again you can remember with the term L. L, lateral corticospinal tract, that is coming to the lateral nucleus of the ventral horn, supplying limb muscles. L, L, L. Anterior corticospinal tract, on the other hand, it decussates at the level of the spinal cord, coming to the opposite side, going to the medial nucleus of the ventral horn, and that's why supplying the midline muscle or axial musculature. Supplying the midline muscle or axial musculature. Midline muscle or axial musculature. So that's the whole point, guys. I mean, this decussation, if we know about them, it will be easy for us to discuss them in the certain syndromes that we'll talk about. Like, imagine if the injury is somewhere here in the pons or in midbrain, then if pyramidal tract is gone, so obviously these fibers are gone, and even these 15% are also gone. Everything will be gone. So we have contralateral paralysis of limb muscles also and axial muscle also. But if the injury is only to the lateral corticospinal tract, then because anterior corticospinal tract is still working, so your axial muscles of that side will be spared, of the other side will be spared. But limb muscle still will be gone, and main feature will be seen with the limb muscles itself. So this is about the pyramidal tract, the descending tract. So for all the important questions and syndromes, you should know about the dorsal column tract, talking about the ascending, spinothalamic tract, spinocerebellar tract, very, very importantly, where they are decussating and where their lemniscus are. And in the descending tract, the main tract to be remembered here is the corticospinal tract and the level of decussation, obviously, which is the lower part of medulla oblongata.